The void was silent, yet the silence screamed. In the black between dying stars, a ship drifted like a wound that refused to close. Its hull scorched with scripture, its vox channels whispering the same name again and again, Inquisitor Kyle Veritas. They said he had seen too much. They said he had looked upon something no mind of man was meant to comprehend, and that the Ordo Hereticus itself had sealed his name in ciphered archives beneath the palace. Some called him traitor. Others called him martyr. But among those who had heard his last transmission, none spoke of him without a shadow crossing their eyes. For Kyle Veritas had returned from the abyss of knowledge not as a servant of the Emperor, but as its broken reflection. There are stories within the Imperium that should never be told, truths buried beneath 1,000 layers of sanctioned lies. Yet the galaxy burns, and secrets are ash in the mouths of those too afraid to speak them. This is one of those stories. The tale of an Inquisitor who learned that faith can rot, that purity can fracture, and that even the Emperor's light can cast a darkness of its own. The dropship's hull groaned like a dying choir as it pierced the smog-thick skies of Relis Prime. The descent burned the air into ribbons of ochre and ash, cutting through layers of atmosphere steeped in incense and industrial waste. Through the viewport, the planet below appeared less like a world and more like a shrine carved from rot. Its continents were etched with colossal basilicas, each stretching for kilometers, their towers stabbing upward in blind supplication to the Emperor. Every spire flickered with the fire of 10,000 votive candles, each flame a plea for mercy that would never come. Kyle Veritas stood among the ship's trembling bulkheads, watching the descent in silence. His reflection wavered in the glass. Scarred features framed by a worn, inquisitorial hood, the aquila of his rank scorched black from age and fire. The others aboard the craft kept their distance, as though proximity to him invited judgment. Perhaps it did. The Inquisition was a name spoken with reverence and terror alike, and Veritas carried that dual weight with the resignation of one who had long ceased to feel either. When the landing thrusters screamed and the dropship slammed into the ash dunes outside Relis Prime's primary spire, the shock ran through the ground like a prayer denied. Gale stepped out into a world where every breath was filtered through sanctified toxins. The air tasted of metal and burnt oil, the scent of devotion reduced to machinery. Before him rose the capital's great cathedral, Sanctum Solus, a mountain of adamantine and stained glass that shimmered faintly in the wan light. Its gates were taller than titans, engraved with scenes of the Emperor's glory rendered in brass and bone. Yet the artistry felt hollow, as though the faith that once filled it had long since been spent. A procession of priests awaited him at the gate, their bodies more augmetic than flesh. Vox grills replaced mouths, servo limbs hissed beneath robes heavy with sigils of purification. The foremost of them, Archdeacon Thelmar, bowed low, mechanical eyes clicking into alignment. "Inquisitor Veritas," he rasped, his voice filtered through static. "We are honored by your arrival. The Ecclesiarchy prays your mission brings illumination to our troubled flock." Cole inclined his head. "Illumination," he echoed softly, the word tasting like rust. "I will need access to the reports on the disappearances and the shrine records, particularly those sealed under the doctrine of sacred silence." Thelmar hesitated, his servo-skull attendants hovering uncertainly. "Those texts are not for mortal review. They concern relics beyond sanctioned comprehension." Coyle's gaze lifted, and for a moment the full weight of his office settled upon the Archdeacon like a blade. "That," he said, "is precisely why I am here." Inside the sanctum, the air grew dense with incense, thick enough to blur the sight. Choirs of half-dead children sang hymns they no longer understood, their voices carried by vox emitters hidden in the walls. Candles melted into the metal floor, forming rivers of wax that clung to the boots of the faithful. Coil moved through them like a ghost among believers, his footfalls absorbed by the chanting. Every statue, every relic, every mural screamed piety, and yet beneath it pulsed a faint, rhythmic hum, a vibration that was neither mechanical nor holy, resonating just beneath hearing. He paused before a mural depicting the Emperor enthroned in radiant light, but the paint had begun to blister, as though rejecting its own sanctity. A faint heat radiated from beneath the wall, and Coil touched it with a gloved hand. The vibration intensified, subtle but deliberate. The wall was breathing. Later, in the catacombs below the sanctum, Cale examined the remains of the vanished pilgrims. The bodies lay preserved in stasis caskets, their skin marked with symmetrical lesions that formed patterns, almost language. Under Auspec's scan, the lesions emitted faint electromagnetic signatures. Not chaotic, ordered, structured like scripture. He traced one pattern across a corpse's arm, and though he could not name the language, the structure felt familiar. Too precise to be random. Reports say they were found near the processional of Ash, murmured his acolyte, Lisa Dren, a former archivist turned field adjutant. Her eyes were steady but hollow. Local enforcers claimed the victims were self-flagellants. They assumed the wounds were devotional. They were not self-inflicted, Coyle replied. These markings follow a deliberate symmetry. This one? He gestured to the curve along the chest. Repeats in sequences of 13. That is not penitence, that is intent. Lysa frowned. Intent of what? Coyle didn't answer. His mind was already reaching backward, toward the edges of memory, toward a mission years ago in the Goltis Reach, where an entire sect had spoken in numbers before dying in synchrony. The similarity was undeniable. He had buried that memory under sanctioned forgetfulness, the kind administered by Ordo-approved hypno-doctrines. But some things once known could not be buried completely. He looked at the bodies again. Their mouths were sealed with wax inscribed with the sigil of the ecclesiarchy itself. Not heresy, silence, the official stamp of denial. He wondered who they were trying to protect, the faithful or themselves. Above, the bells of the sanctum tolled for vespers. Each note echoed through the stone like the slow heartbeat of a dying god. Night on Raylis Prime did not bring darkness so much as a deepening of the haze. The sky glowed faintly red from the endless burn of the Manufactoria, and the air shimmered with particulate ash that clung to skin and soul alike. Cale stood upon one of the sanctum's external balconies, watching the distant glow of the lower hives pulse like a wound beneath the holy city. The sermons of the day had faded, replaced by the whisper of the wind through the steel reliquaries that lined the walls. He could almost imagine the voices of the lost pilgrims carried within that wind, chanting from beyond mortal reach. He drew a breath that rasped through the rebreather grill at his throat and closed his eyes. For a moment, he tried to recall the last time he had prayed and meant it. The Emperor's face rose in his mind, not as a comfort, but as a question without answer. The old words came automatically, etched into reflex. From the darkness, light; from ignorance, faith; from weakness, the will of the master of mankind. He recited them without feeling, as one recites a code to open a vault long unused. Behind him, the hiss of servo motors broke the stillness. Archdeacon Thelmar approached once more, flanked by servitors carrying data slates and sanctified parchment. "Inquisitor," the mechanized cleric began. His tone clipped with reverence and unease. We have compiled the reports you requested. Records of the vanished, transcribed sermons from the months preceding their disappearance, and statements from witnesses, such as they are." Cale turned, his cloak whispering against the marble. "And the sealed texts?" Thelmar's augmetic fingers twitched. "The doctrine of sacred silence was established by decree of the Synod Ministra itself. I cannot—" Kyle's voice was soft, but it cut through the air like a scalpel. "You can, and you will." For a heartbeat, the priest's system stuttered. Then, reluctantly, he signaled the servitors to deliver the final data slate, its casing wrapped in purity seals, its surface etched with the Aquila. Kyle took it, breaking the wax sigils with a flick of his thumb. The machine spirit within the slate hummed weakly, its runes flickering to life. Words formed across the display, written in the tight, formal cant of ecclesiarchal record, concerning the hymn of echoing flesh, restricted under Article 7 of the Hereticus Obscura, to be read only by authority of the Inquisition. He began to read. The text described a phenomenon spreading through the pilgrim masses of Relis Prime, a song transmitted not through voice but through sensation. Those afflicted claimed to feel hymns vibrating within their bones, a resonance that compelled them toward the lower hives. Many vanished. Those who returned were changed. Their speech slowed, their prayers synchronized to impossible rhythm. They began to carve symbols into the cathedral walls, phrases the ecclesiarchy could not translate. All official mention of the echoing flesh was expunged, the afflicted executed, the records sealed. Cale scrolled further, past the expurgated lines, and found something half erased but still legible. Pattern suggests interference with the Astronomican frequencies. Possible psychic contamination of faith transmission. Recommendation: containment. The entry ended abruptly. He closed the slate and looked out over the city again. Containment. Always containment. The ecclesiarchy had learned that the easiest way to preserve belief was to silence those who had seen too much. He could feel the weight of that silence pressing in from every corner, the kind of silence that wasn't absence, but the burial of something alive. Later, Kyle descended with Lisa into the underhive. They went in disguise, robes drawn tight, passing through the lower gates beneath the eyes of the enforcers. The air grew heavier as they descended. Vox hymns faded to static. The ground here was slick with oil and wax runoff, and the walls were lined with votive glyphs carved by trembling hands. The faithful had built their shrines from scrap metal and bone, each altar dedicated to a fragment of the Emperor, his hand, his gaze, his silence. But among these relics were new icons, crude yet deliberate. Spirals intersected by lines of light, etched with the words, "He watches," from beneath. The deeper they went, the louder the hum became. The same vibration Carl had felt beneath the mural in the sanctum. Only now it throbbed openly, shaking the rusted walkways. The sound wasn't carried by air, but by the very metal of the city. He followed it to an abandoned manufactorum, its gates sealed by faded sigils of quarantine. The servitors stationed at the entrance had long since ceased functioning, their mechanical bodies locked in perpetual prayer. Inside, the darkness was alive. Machinery hung like skeletal ribs, glistening with condensation. Cale's torch beam caught motion, something crawling along the ceiling, vanishing before the light found it. Lisa drew her pistol, her breath sharp through the rebreather. "I read power signatures," she whispered. "Something's active." They found the source at the center of the manufactorum, a shrine made of repurposed cogitators, their screens flickering with alternating script and holy icons. At its core rested an object the size of a skull, polished, metallic, but pulsing faintly like organic tissue. Binary code whispered across its surface, but the sound was almost human, like a choir trapped in static. Cole reached toward it, and for an instant the whispers aligned into words he understood. "He sees you, Inquisitor." The light burst from the object, brief and blinding. When vision returned, the device was inert once more, and blood trickled from Cale's nose. His head pounded with echoes of words that were not his. Lysa steadied him, but he pushed her hand away, his expression unreadable. "We burn it," she said. "No," Kyle murmured, staring at the thing. "We take it. Someone built this, and someone wants it forgotten." As they left the manufactorum, the hum behind them faded, replaced by a deep, almost sorrowful silence. For a moment, Cale thought he heard distant singing. Not human, not machine, but something that existed in the space between. He didn't speak of it. Some sounds, once acknowledged, become real. Above, the bells of Rylus Prime tolled again. But this time, their rhythm seemed off by a fraction of a beat, as though the world itself had begun to hesitate in its devotion. By dawn, the storm clouds above Rylus Prime had thickened to a bruise. The rain was not water, but dust and cinders, falling in a slow gray veil that coated the spires and the faithful alike. Cale returned to the sanctum before sunrise, the relic sealed inside a stasis shroud, its faint pulse still visible through the containment field. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw light without source, and heard fragments of that impossible voice. Its tone, neither warning nor promise, but inevitability. Thelmar met him in the lower archive chamber, surrounded by shelves of data slates older than the city itself. He regarded the containment field with the air of a man looking at his own death. "You brought it here," he said, half accusation, half prayer. "Do you know what you have done?" Cale removed his gloves, setting them on the cold marble table. "I'm here to learn what it is. You will assist me." The priest's servos whined in agitation. "There are things that must remain unknown, Inquisitor. Knowledge is a contagion. The Emperor shields us not only through faith, but through ignorance." Cale's gaze was steady. Then perhaps his shield has failed. For a moment, the priest's mechanical limbs froze mid-motion, as though struck by heresy itself. Cale ignored him and activated the cogitator arrays. The containment field flickered to full power, and the relic's pulse steadied. Symbols cascaded across the screens. Linguistic sequences, fractal patterns, bursts of binary prayer. The translation algorithm struggled to parse them. The machine spirit of the array shrieked once, then went silent. Lysa approached cautiously. "The sequence repeats," she said, pointing to the waveform display. "Every 37 seconds, the same cluster returns." Call frowned. Isolated. The room filled with sound, if it could be called that. A slow modulation, almost a heartbeat, overlaid with whispers at the edge of perception. Then, between the distortions, a phrase emerged. "He waits below the light." The words twisted like a nail through thought. Thelmar fell to his knees, mechanical limbs spasming as he began to chant the litany of cleansing. Cole silenced him with a look. "You've heard this before," he said quietly. The priest trembled. "There are relics buried deep beneath the cathedra, ancient beyond the founding of Rylus Prime. The Mechanicus declared them sacred and forbidden in the same breath. We have guarded them for generations without knowing why. Some whisper they are fragments of the throne itself, shards of its radiance carried to the stars in the early days of the Imperium. Others," he hesitated, Others say they are its shadows. Coil considered the relic again. Its surface seemed to shimmer now, though no light touched it. "You believe this to be a piece of the throne?" "I believe it to be proof that faith has boundaries," Thelmar whispered, and his vox grill sputtered into silence. Hours passed as Coil documented the artifact's properties, his notes filling page after page of encrypted scripture. The act steadied him, though the words themselves began to feel alien, as if dictated by something unseen. He caught himself writing symbols that were not in any human lexicon, spirals that curled inward like thought devouring itself. When he noticed, he tore the parchment and fed it to the sanctifier flame. By nightfall, the relic's hum had changed, its rhythm aligned with the cathedral's bells, as though it were listening. Coil stood in the archive chamber's doorway, watching the city through the stained glass. The rain had ceased, but the sky remained the color of bone. Pilgrims still crowded the streets, their torches flickering like veins of blood in the darkness. Yet something in their movement felt wrong. Too coordinated, too calm. They bowed in unison, their prayers merging into one voice. A murmur that rose and fell with mechanical precision. He descended to the gates to see for himself. The faithful knelt before the sanctum steps, eyes wide and glassy, lips moving in silent rhythm. The hum beneath the stones echoed their pulse. Lisa reached for her weapon, but Cale raised a hand. "No. Watch." A pilgrim at the front of the crowd lifted his hands toward the heavens, palms flayed, the wounds forming perfect circles. Light spilled from them, not fire, not energy, but something subtler, like the reflection of a sun that no longer existed. The others followed, the glow spreading from body to body until the entire procession shimmered with pale luminance. Their mouths opened as one. The sound that followed was not human. It was the same phrase, layered 1,000 times over until the air vibrated with it. "He waits below the light." Then the glow vanished. The pilgrims collapsed in silence, as if strings had been cut. Coil stood frozen. The hum had stopped. Even the bells above the city hesitated, their tones suspended mid-peal. The stillness was absolute. Lysa's voice broke it. "What are they, my lord?" Cale didn't answer. His gaze lingered on the empty street, on the faint afterimage of light where the pilgrims had knelt. In that ghostly shimmer, he thought he saw movement. A shadow forming beneath the stone, vast and patient. He turned away before it could take shape. "Seal the sanctum," he said. "No one leaves, no one enters." As the doors closed behind them, the final bell struck midnight. The sound carried through the spire like the tolling of judgment itself. And far below, somewhere in the catacombs, the relic began to pulse again. This time, in perfect time with Cale Veritas's heartbeat. Before we descend into that darkness, you may lend your strength to this archive of forbidden knowledge. Like, share, and subscribe, so that the echo of truth may survive beyond the Vox. For in this age of endless war, remembrance itself is rebellion. The days that followed blurred into one another like smoke dissolving into incense. Relis Prime no longer slept. From the highest sanctums to the rusted lungs of the Underhive, the hum persisted. A rhythm faint yet omnipresent, resonating through steel and prayer alike. The ecclesiarchy declared it divine, a new hymn born of the Emperor's will. The populace responded with feverish devotion. Processions wound through the streets, faces uplifted, eyes glazed with ecstasy. Yet beneath the surface, Cale Veritas felt only dread. The relic pulsed within its containment field, its rhythm perfectly synchronized with the city's breath. He had ordered the cathedral sealed, but faith is not so easily imprisoned. reports reached him of Manufactoria converting to shrine factories, where machines produced devotional artifacts that none could explain. Relics sculpted from metal that flowed like liquid when touched, icons that emitted warmth as if alive. The local Mechanicus priests denied responsibility, their data looms showing no record of such production. Something had taken hold of the Manufactoria's spirits, a contagion spreading through circuits and minds alike. Cole and Lysa descended once more into the Underhive, accompanied this time by a small retinue of sanctioned Skitari, soldiers of the Omnissiah clad in red and iron, their faces hidden behind smooth, featureless masks. Their leader, Alpha Primus Luther 9, greeted Kale with a vox click of recognition. Inquisitor Veritus, the priesthood sends its obedience. We are to assist in containment, nothing more. Kale regarded the soldier's augmetic limbs, each etched with sacred Benharic script. Containment implies knowledge, he said. Tell me what your masters know. Luther's mechanical voice hissed like static. Our masters know nothing, but they fear what you seek. The descent took them through tunnels slick with condensation, walls vibrating with that same faint hum. Occasionally, the sound deepened into a resonance that made the metal shiver. When they reached the lowest strata, the air thickened with electromagnetic charge. The glow of lumen globes faltered, replaced by the faint phosphorescence of fungus growing in patterns too symmetrical to be natural. Lisa brushed her hand along the wall. The texture was smooth like bone. They reached a massive gate sealed with Mechanicus sigils. Luther's team interfaced with the lock, their mechadendrites snaking into data ports, whispering binary cant. The gate groaned open, releasing a wave of cold air that smelled of ozone and decay. Beyond lay a vast chamber, a manufactorum unlike any Kale had seen. Machinery stretched into the dark, a forest of pistons and cranes moving without human command. Rows of servitors labored at forges, their eyes vacant, their hands precise. Yet their work was wrong. They were crafting not weapons or tools, but shapes that defied function. Rings of metal inscribed with prayer, spheres containing whispering vox cores, statues of the Emperor with faces obscured by coiling wires. The machines hummed in unison, each strike of the hammer perfectly timed with the city's unseen heartbeat. Cole stepped forward, his voice low. Deactivate them. Luther hesitated. That may anger the machine spirits. Then we will see what they pray to. At his signal, the Skitari raised their weapons, arc rifles humming with restrained power. A volley of energy flashed through the chamber, striking servitors, cogitators, and sacred consuls alike. Sparks cascaded like falling stars. For a moment, silence followed. Then, one by one, the servitors turned their heads toward Kyle. They spoke in unison. He waits below the light. Their voices were monotone yet layered, as if hundreds of echoes spoke through each throat. The words reverberated through the chamber, rattling metal and bone. Cole felt the relic's pulse quicken beneath his armor. The Skitari opened fire again, cutting the servitors down in bursts of searing energy. The bodies fell, twitching, their mouths still moving soundlessly. Lisa crossed herself, the gesture trembling. What in the Emperor's name is this? Cole didn't answer. He was staring at the forge at the chamber's center. Amid the ruin, something glowed beneath the slag. A shape coiled around itself like molten glass. He reached for it, brushing aside debris. It was another relic, smaller but identical in form to the one sealed above. As his hand drew near, it pulsed once, and every lumen in the chamber flared white. When the light receded, Luther was gone. Only his scorched armor remained, fused to the floor. The remaining Skitarii stood motionless, their optics dim. Cole straightened slowly, the relic cradled in his gloved hands. "This wasn't built here," he said quietly. "It was grown." Behind him, the sound of chanting began again, faint, distant, and rising from the tunnels they had come through. Voices of the faithful, echoing downward. "Seal the entrance," Kyle ordered. "Now." The Skitarii obeyed, welding the gates shut as the chant grew louder. Cole turned toward the darkness beyond the forge, where the hum had deepened into something almost like breathing. Something alive. The tunnels behind the manufactorum stretched deep into the planet's crust, older than the Hive itself. Cale could feel it in the architecture, the way the stone shifted from industrial composite to something far more ancient. There were remnants of pre-imperial construction here, arches and symbols etched in languages older than Gothic, half erased by centuries of sanctified neglect. The air thickened with moisture and static charge, and every step echoed like a whisper trying to repeat itself. They walked by the light of lumen flares that guttered and flared unpredictably, as if reacting to unseen currents. The hum grew fainter but more focused, a thread of sound that seemed to vibrate within, the skull rather than the ear. Cole followed it with grim determination, the second relic secured in his satchel. It pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, but sometimes, between pulses, it hesitated, as though listening for something beyond him. Lisa's voice was quiet behind him. "We should destroy them, my lord. Burn them before whatever this is spreads further." Cole didn't look back. "Burn what you don't understand, and you only feed the flame. These relics are the key." "The key to what?" she asked. "That," Coyle said, "is what I intend to learn before they find me for asking." The path ended in a vast cavern lit by faint bioluminescent veins running through the walls. At its center stood a structure that should not have existed here, a shrine of metal and glass suspended over a pit of churning light. The architecture was wrong for Imperial design. Too fluid, too graceful. No rivets, no seams, only surfaces that folded into one another like thoughts given form. Cale approached the edge, staring into the pit below. The light there wasn't illumination, it was movement. Countless motes swirling like dust caught in a sunbeam, forming and unforming patterns that suggested faces, wings, perhaps even prayers. The whispering grew louder, a tide of binary and voice intertwined. Lisa raised her weapon. "Something's coming through." Coyle stepped closer, his eyes reflecting the glow. "No, it's already here." As he spoke, the air thickened, bending the light into spirals. The machinery around the shrine began to move, pistons breathing in slow rhythm. From the pit rose a shape, metallic yet organic, its surface rippling with faint symbols identical to those on the relics. It hovered, featureless and radiant, the light shifting as though it searched for focus. "Inquisitor Cale Veritas." The voice came from everywhere, layered and mechanical, but within it was the cadence of human speech. "You carry the fragments, they remember you." Lisa's breath caught. "Emperor preserve us." Cole steadied himself. "Identify yourself." "I am the Echo," the voice replied, a shadow of the throne's reflection. "We were made to listen. Now we are forgotten." Coyle's throat tightened. "The throne? You claim origin from Terra?" "The throne is a wound that bleeds light," the Echo said. "We were born from its spillage, scattered across the void to feed the Astronomican's reach. Once, we sang with it. Now, the song has grown silent. The faithful call it decay. You call it heresy. It is neither." The cavern trembled as the voice deepened. Cole's mind reeled with images that weren't his. visions of the golden throne towering in blinding radiance, of souls burning like candles within its mechanisms, of light stretching across the void and faltering. He staggered back, clutching his head. "Stop," he rasped. "You're bleeding into my thoughts." "We do not speak," the echo murmured. "We resonate." Lisa fired, the bolt round tearing through the shimmer. The sound vanished, and the cavern plunged into silence. The thing collapsed inward, its light folding like a dying star. Call fell to his knees, gasping. The relics in his satchel throbbed violently, then went still. For a moment, only the drip of condensation broke the quiet. Then, faintly, from the pit, came the sound of something vast shifting below the stone. A slow exhalation, like the breath of the world itself. Lisa approached cautiously. "Is it dead?" Call looked up, eyes hollow. No, it spoke the truth. This was only an echo. He rose, brushing the dust from his coat. The relics were inert now, their light extinguished, but he felt their weight differently, as if they were no longer separate objects, but parts of a single, unfinished whole. He turned toward the tunnel. "We're leaving." As they ascended, the path behind them began to collapse. The hum ceased entirely. The manufactorum above lay in ruin, its machinery frozen mid-motion, servitors reduced to lifeless shells. Outside, the streets were empty. The faithful were gone, their torches extinguished. They reached the sanctum at dusk. Cale ordered the relics secured in the deepest vault and sealed under inquisitorial cipher. He could not risk their destruction, not yet. Not until he understood the pattern. That night, as the bells tolled, he sat alone in his chamber, recording his findings into his private vox log. "Raylus Prime is lost," he said quietly, voice trembling despite himself. "Faith here has been replaced by imitation. The machines pray louder than men, and something beneath the Emperor's light is listening. I do not yet know if it waits to be worshipped or to be freed." He ended the recording, sealing it behind encryption keyed to his genetic signature. Then he sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the relic's containment glow leaking faintly beneath the door. It pulsed once, then twice. Then, faintly, he heard his own voice whisper from within the field. "He waits below the light." Cale awoke to the smell of burning incense and static. His quarters were dim, the light reduced to a thin amber thread leaking through the cracks in the shutters. For a moment, he could not tell if the whispering he heard was memory or reality. It came from the relic vault below, faint, rhythmic, echoing through the stone like a pulse he could feel behind his teeth. He rose from the cot, boots scraping the metal floor, and reached for his sidearm. There was no fear in the motion, only weariness. He had learned long ago that in the Emperor's service, sleep was a luxury and sanity an indulgence. By the time he reached the vault, the air had grown colder. Frost clung to the edges of the bulkhead door, and his breath misted before him. The lock recognized his biosignature and disengaged with a hiss. Within, the relics hovered within their containment fields, but the glow that surrounded them was no longer gold. It had deepened to the shade of dying embers. Lisa was already there, standing still, her face lit by that smoldering light. She turned at his approach, and for an instant, he saw her eyes reflecting the same dull crimson. "They've changed," she said quietly. "I came down to check the seals. I thought I heard chanting." Cale studied the containment fields. The relics no longer pulsed in perfect unison but alternated in sequence, one answering the other like call and response. Their surfaces rippled, forming shapes almost recognizable. Circuits that resembled veins, symbols that resembled letters. "It's communication," he murmured. "They're speaking to one another. Or to something else," Lysa said. He nodded once. "Either way, it means they're aware." As he moved closer, a tremor ran through the vault. The containment fields flared, throwing light across the walls, and for an instant, the air filled with sound. A cascade of overlapping voices. Fragments of prayer, binary code, and something older. The words were not clear, yet Kale felt meaning press into his thoughts, raw and untranslatable. His vision blurred. When it cleared, he saw the relics had rearranged themselves within the field, aligning in a precise geometric pattern, an aquila inverted, wings folded inward. Lysa reached for her weapon, but Kale raised a hand. "No, let it finish." The pattern held for several seconds, then dissolved. The glow faded. The relics fell silent. Kale exhaled slowly, feeling the ache behind his eyes throb in rhythm with his heart. He turned to Lysa. "We can't stay on this world, whatever this is, it's spreading. We need to reach the archives on Bastion Kelth. If there's record of these artifacts anywhere, it'll be there." Lysa nodded, but hesitated. "And what do we tell the Ordo?" "The truth," Kale said. "Or the part of it that won't get us executed." They began preparations within the hour. The remaining Skitarii were silent, their machine spirits seemingly dulled by what had transpired below. As Kale moved through the sanctum's upper halls, he found the clergy in disarray. Many of the priests had gone blind overnight, their augmetics corroded from within. Those who still lived chanted fragments of a new litany, one that made no mention of the Emperor. Instead, they invoked the Sleeper in Radiance and painted his sigil on their walls with their own blood. Call ordered the sanctum evacuated, though he knew it was too late. Faith had curdled into infection. At the spaceport, storms raged across the upper atmosphere, delaying launch clearance. Cole stood at the observation deck, watching lightning crawl across the clouds like veins of living fire. Relis Prime's orbital stations flickered in the distance, one by one, going dark. The Vox channels filled with static and garbled transmissions. Prayers turned to screams. Lysa joined him, fastening her cloak. "Transport's ready. If we leave now, we can clear orbit before the radiation surge hits." Kyle turned to her, his face pale beneath the shadows. "Do you still hear it?" She hesitated. "Sometimes. In the silence between words, like a thought I can't quite remember." "So it's in us now, too," he said softly. They boarded the shuttle without ceremony. The engines roared to life, burning through ash and cloud, lifting them away from the dying planet. Cole watched Relis Prime shrink beneath them, its spires collapsing in slow motion under unseen strain. From orbit, the world glowed faintly at its poles, an unnatural light spreading through its crust like veins of gold. Lysa saw it too. "Emperor's mercy," she whispered. "What have we done?" Kale's gaze stayed fixed on the planet as he spoke. "Nothing. This was already in motion long before we arrived." When the ship broke free of atmosphere, he finally looked away. His reflection in the viewport was unfamiliar. Lines of exhaustion carved deeper than years could justify, eyes hollowed by something heavier than guilt. For a moment, he thought he saw light flicker behind them, the same dull crimson that bled from the relics. He blinked, and it was gone. "Set course for Bastion Kolth," he ordered. Lysa acknowledged, her hands moving across the controls. The stars stretched into lines as the warp drives engaged. But as the transition field enveloped the ship, Kale felt it again, the hum, faint but unmistakable, resonating through the deck plates and into his bones. It was slower now, deeper, as if the sound no longer came from the relics but from somewhere within him. he did not speak of it. There were some truths that even an Inquisitor dared not confess aloud. When the ship entered the void, the light of Relis Prime vanished behind them. But the hum followed. And in the silence between the stars, Kale realized he no longer knew whether it was the echo that haunted him, or his own faith learning how to die. The warp was a sea of dreams and ghosts. To mortal eyes it appeared as motionless color, but to Kale Veritas it was a mirror that reflected too much. The ship, St. Halcyon, drifted through the Imperium like a coffin borne on the tide of a screaming ocean. Within its steel walls, reality bled at the edges. Lights flickered in rhythm to no known current. Air tasted faintly of copper, and shadows moved even when nothing cast them. Kyle had lived through 1,000 transits before, yet none like this. The hum that had haunted Relis Prime persisted here, low and steady beneath the thrum of the Geller field, as if the warp itself were listening. He sat in the ship's chapel, the only place where silence still pretended to exist. The reliquary lamps flickered around him, their flames bending toward the same unseen point above the altar. Before him rested a single object, the smallest relic, sealed within triple containment. Its surface was dull now, lifeless, but Kale could feel its presence pressing against the walls of his mind like a voice waiting for permission to speak. He opened his journal, the one bound in black leather, the one the Ordo would never see. 17th day in transit, he murmured into the recorder. The relics are inert, though the hum remains. Crew reports auditory distortion. Words in the static, the sound of their own names whispered back to them. Lisa sleeps little. I dream of light, not the Emperor's light, but something colder. He paused, gaze flicking to the relic. I am beginning to suspect that it remembers me. The chapel door opened with a soft hiss. Lisa entered, her features drawn, eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. The navigator says we've strayed off the plotted corridor, she said. Warp currents shifting against our field. He's hearing voices. Coyle rose, his movements deliberate. Describe them. He says they're singing. That word chilled the air between them. Kale crossed to the altar, sealing the relic within a stasis case. We'll go to him. The navigator's sanctum was a cathedral of glass and steel, its walls alive with the colors of the Imperium. The navigator himself knelt before the viewing port, his third eye weeping light. Cole stopped several paces behind him. Navigator Raylan, he said. Report. Raylan's voice was cracked with strain. The current bends, my lord. Something moves ahead of us. It sings in the tides, beautiful, terrible. It knows our names. Coyle glanced at Lisa, who stood rigid beside him. Can you locate its source? It's everywhere, Raylan whispered, and nowhere, like a thought that isn't mine. He turned then, and Kale saw that his third eye had changed. The iris had fractured into a spiral pattern, the same sigil etched upon the relics. Before Kale could speak, alarm screamed through the sanctum. The Geller field flickered, its protective shimmer breaking like thin glass. Shadows twisted along the walls, taking on shape, form, and intent. Lisa drew her weapon, firing at movement that vanished before impact. Cole lunged for the control dais, forcing the emergency reinforcement protocols. The hum became a roar, reverberating through their bones. Raylan screamed, clutching his head. It's inside the field. It's singing through the light. Coyle struck him across the temple with the butt of his pistol, silencing him before panic could spread. The navigator collapsed, unconscious but alive. The controls stabilized. The field pulsed once more, sealing the warp from the ship. Silence returned, thick and trembling. Lisa's voice broke it. What was that? Kale didn't answer immediately. His pulse still thundered in his ears. He stared out at the shifting colors of the Imperium beyond the port. In that vastness, he thought he saw something. A flicker of structure where none should exist. A shape like a cathedral inverted, its towers stretching downward into the abyss. It vanished in an instant, leaving only darkness behind. He spoke softly, as if confessing to the void itself. "I think we just heard the Emperor's echo." Later, alone in his quarters, Kale replayed the recording from the navigator's chamber. When he slowed the waveform, filtered out the interference, he heard it, buried beneath the alarms and screams, a voice. His own voice, layered 1,000 times. He waits below the light. He sat motionless for a long time, the words looping in the silence, until he could no longer tell if he was listening to the recording or to his own thoughts answering back. When sleep finally claimed him, he dreamed of Terra. Not the shining throne world of scripture, but a dead star around which a broken halo of machinery spun, and at its center, a throne that bled light through cracks that never healed. The dream clung to him long after waking. Kyle sat upright in his narrow cot, drenched in cold sweat, the echo of that bleeding throne still searing behind his eyes. The ship hummed with the dull mechanical rhythm of survival, but beneath it, there it was again, the same pulse. Fainter, but perfectly timed to the beating of his heart. He rose, steadied himself, and moved to the mirror bolted to the wall. For a moment, his reflection lagged behind his motion by a fraction of a second. When it caught up, he saw something that hadn't been there before. A mark. Tiny, barely visible, traced into the skin beneath his collarbone. A spiral, precise and symmetrical. He touched it, half expecting pain, but felt only warmth. A pulse beneath his fingertips. He stepped back, breath shallow, as if afraid to draw attention from whatever was watching him through that pattern. Lysa's voice called softly from the corridor. "My lord, the navigator is dead." Kale closed his coat and turned. The navigator's body lay in the sanctum, curled beside the viewing port. His third eye had burst, leaving only a crater of scorched tissue. His hands clutched a strip of parchment torn from his robes, scrawled with looping script. Kale took it carefully. The writing wasn't human. It pulsed faintly, alive for seconds before fading. Only one phrase remained legible. "The song remembers." Lysa stood behind him, her voice brittle. "We should jettison him before the warp can claim more." Cole nodded. "Do it, and purge the sanctum. No one enters without my order." As she left, he lingered a moment longer. The glass of the viewing port rippled faintly as he stared into it, like the warp pressing a palm against the other side, and for a heartbeat he thought he saw a face there, not monstrous, not divine, but human, his own, whispering words he couldn't hear. The ship emerged from the Imperium 12 hours later, rupturing into the cold clarity of real space above Bastion Kolth. The fortress world floated like a scar of steel and rock, its atmosphere choked with the breath of countless forges. Kyle watched it grow on the view screen, feeling something that might have been relief, though it was laced with dread. Bastion Kolth was a world of archivists, penitents, and warriors of the Ordo, an entire planet built around the preservation of knowledge too dangerous for the Imperium to remember. They landed under inquisitorial clearance, escorted immediately by a cadre of stormtroopers. Cole kept his hood drawn as he and Lisa walked the bridge to the archive spire. The structure loomed above the landing platform, its walls engraved with script so old the words had become ornament. Within, light filtered through crystal slats, refracted into patterns that danced across the marble floors. The silence here was heavy, absolute, as if sound itself feared to linger. At the gate, an adept greeted them. A thin man wrapped in parchment robes, his eyes replaced by augmetic lenses. "Inquisitor Veritus," he murmured, bowing low. "We received your transmission. You seek forbidden texts, yes? Category designation?" Call lowered his hood. "Astronomicon, early M30. Fragments concerning the throne's construction. Cross-reference Mechanicus data if possible." The adept's lenses flickered. "Those records are sealed by decree of the Sigillite himself. No one is permitted—" "I am not no one," Coyle interrupted, his tone a blade's edge. "Authorization Veritas 7 Delta. You will unseal them." The adept hesitated, then bowed again. "As you command, my lord, but I warn you, some knowledge carries memory of its own. It remembers those who read it." Hours passed within the archive's depths. Kyle and Lysa moved among aisles of chained tomes and crystalline data vaults that glowed faintly as they passed. He found the section he sought, a vault marked with the sigil of the early Custody's order, half erased. Within, brittle parchment whispered beneath his gloves. Schematics, fragments of liturgical code, the half-mad ramblings of Madge who had touched the divine and recoiled. Yet amid the madness, a pattern emerged. A phrase repeated across texts spanning centuries. Echo units. The term appeared beside references to the early Astronomicon, the vast psychic beacon that guided humanity through the warp. The echoes were described not as devices, but as extensions of it. Conduits distributed across the Imperium to stabilize the psychic signal. But then came the contradiction. The records claimed they were decommissioned, destroyed during the reign of the first High Lords. Yet, Kale had seen them, held them. They were not destroyed, they were alive. He closed the tome, fingers trembling slightly. "They were pieces of the Astronomicon," he whispered. "Carried to distant worlds to amplify the light, but if they still function, if they've begun to awaken, then something on Terra has changed." Lisa looked up from her own notes. Changed how? Kale stared at the text a long time before answering. "Either the throne is dying, or it's dreaming." A shadow moved across the glass ceiling above them, massive, fleeting. Kale froze. The adept reappeared at the far end of the corridor, face pale, vox grill stuttering with static. "Inquisitor," he rasped, "there is a message for you. Priority cipher. Origin. Terra." Kale's blood went cold. No message should have reached him here, not one unrequested, not one from the throne world itself. He followed the adept to a sealed chamber where a single data slate pulsed with golden light. The cipher recognized his presence, unlocking itself. The message contained only 3 words: cease, return, silence. He stared at it, feeling the weight of every unsaid threat behind those words. The Ordo had discovered his research. They knew. And somewhere deep within the ship still docked outside, the relics began to hum again. The words cease, return, silence glowed upon the slate long after Cole shut down the device. Their afterimage burned into his retinas like a mark of ownership or a curse. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound, thick as oil, pressing down on him until his breath came shallow. He could feel the implication behind those words as clearly as a hand at his throat. He had been seen, and once the Inquisition saw, it did not look away. Lisa watched from the doorway, her expression tight. "Orders?" she asked. Kale's voice was low, steady, the tone of a man who already knew there was no turning back. "They want this buried. That means I was right. They'll hunt us," she said. "They already are." He turned from the slate, his cloak brushing the floor like shadow. "Secure everything we've found. Make multiple copies. Encrypt them through Mechanicus channels. If they try to erase this, they'll find ghosts in every archive." Lisa hesitated. "You think they'll purge Bastion Koth? I think they'll do worse." Hours later, as Cole made his way through the archive's outer corridors, he felt the world shift beneath his boots. The air grew heavier, charged with the scent of ozone and iron. Vox channels crackled with interference, and the lumen globes flickered in unison, as if some unseen pulse were passing through them. He stopped before one of the great stained glass windows and saw Bastion Koth's sky bleed. Lines of fire streaked across the clouds, ships descending from orbit, dark silhouettes haloed in burning light, dropships of the Ordo Hereticus. Call didn't wait to watch them land. He sprinted through the corridor, robes snapping behind him. Lisa met him at the vault entrance, eyes wide. "They're here?" "They've come to silence us," Call said. "They'll destroy the archive." "Then what are we—" "Running," he cut her off. "There's nothing left to save but truth." They fled through the lower catacombs as the first bombardment struck. The shockwaves rolled through the stone, sending cascades of dust down from the vaulted ceilings. Red emergency lights burst to life, painting everything in the hue of blood. Servitors stumbled through the corridors, their programming ruptured by the tremors, chanting fragments of the litany of obedience in broken unison. Kyle ignored them, his mind already 3 steps ahead, charting a path to the landing bay where their ship still waited. As they descended, the relics pulsed once more, faintly visible through the containment seals Lisa carried. Their light had shifted again, not red, not gold, but white, pure and blinding, as though they drew strength from the very destruction surrounding them. The first of the Hereticus stormtroopers appeared at the far end of the hall, their armor adorned with purity seals, their bolters humming with restrained wrath. Kale raised his hand, shouting, "By my authority, stand down! I am Inquisitor Veritus." The leader's vox grill crackled, his voice devoid of emotion. "You are no longer recognized by the Holy Ordos. You are under sanction for forbidden inquiry and contamination of faith. Submit for purification." Kale smiled faintly. "Faith cannot be purified." Then he fired. Bolter rounds screamed through the corridor, ripping into stone and flesh alike. The air filled with the thunder of gunfire and the scent of propellant. Kale moved with the precision of a man who had killed his own doubts long before he ever pulled a trigger. Lisa fought beside him, her movements sharp and fluid. The relics pulsed brighter, their light bending the air, distorting sound. The stormtroopers hesitated, their targeting arrays faltering. Kyle seized the moment, throwing a plasma charge that detonated in a blinding flare. When the smoke cleared, only silence remained. Bodies lay scattered, armor fused to bone. Cole leaned against the wall, chest heaving. Lisa's face was streaked with soot, but her eyes burned with something fierce. Fear, yes, but also conviction. "They'll send. More," she said. "Then we'll make sure they find nothing to take back." They reached the landing bay amid chaos. Servitors ran in circles. Vox systems screamed endless warnings, and through the reinforced glass, Cole saw the city below burning. The Ordo's ships had begun orbital cleansing, their bombardments striking with surgical cruelty. The archive spire cracked under the assault, collapsing inward like a dying candle. Kyle stared, feeling no triumph, no anger, only the weight of inevitability. They boarded their vessel, the St. Halcyon, as explosions tore through the upper atmosphere. Lisa secured the relics in the containment vault while Coyle took the pilot's chair. As they lifted off, the view filled with flame. Bastion Kolth disintegrated below them, its surface fractured into veins of molten metal. For a long time, neither spoke. Then, Lysa broke the silence. "They'll mark us traitors." Coil's expression didn't change. "Let them. I've seen what the throne calls truth. They can burn a world, but they can't unlearn what they fear." She studied him. "And what is it they fear?" Kale looked down at his hands, the faint spiral mark beneath his collarbone now faintly glowing through the fabric. That the Emperor is no longer watching. The ship tore into the void, engines howling. Cole set a course far from any sanctioned corridor, toward the uncharted edges near the halo stars. He needed distance, isolation, time to think. Yet, as the warp engines prepared for ignition, the relics began to hum again, and the lights dimmed in sequence, responding to an unseen rhythm. Lisa frowned. Something's interfering with the Geller field. Kale's voice was calm, too calm. "No, it's synchronizing." The deck plates trembled beneath their feet. From somewhere deep within the ship came a chorus of whispers, binary and prayer interwoven, impossible to separate. The relic's containment fields flared, and the hum became a voice. "He waits below the light." Lisa reached for the emergency purge controls, but Kale stopped her hand. His eyes burned with quiet understanding or madness. "No, let it speak." The light filled the bridge, white and endless. In that radiance, Kale saw visions, cities of gold collapsing into oceans of data, the Astronomicon flickering, its flame guttering beneath the weight of eternity. He saw Terra, and beneath it, a heart that still beat, slow and thunderous. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the light vanished. The ship was silent. Kale stood in the dark, trembling, his reflection faintly visible in the black glass of the viewport. His voice, when it came, was little more than a whisper. "I know now." He turned to Lysa, whose face was pale with horror. "There's something beneath the throne, and it dreams." The void beyond the halo stars was colder than memory. The St. Halcyon drifted through it like a wound untended, its hull scarred from warp storms, its Vox arrays dead. In the absence of light, the ship seemed almost to dissolve into the dark. Inside, the only illumination came from the relic's faint pulse, a heartbeat that refused to die. Kale Veritas sat alone in the command chamber, surrounded by silence that was no longer empty. Weeks had passed since the vision, or days. Time had begun to bleed at the edges, dissolving like ink in water. Lisa had taken to avoiding sleep, afraid of what might follow when her eyes closed. The relics spoke in her dreams now, their whispers threading through the static of her thoughts. Call, for his part, had ceased resisting. He no longer prayed. Prayer implied distance, and whatever this was had come far too close. He spent hours staring into the void, listening, not through his ears but through that inner pulse that hummed with each breath. He had begun to recognize its rhythm, not random but structured, deliberate, a language of resonance. Each beat was a word, each silence a sentence. It spoke of corridors beneath mountains of gold, of endless chambers lit by burning souls, of guardians who no longer knew what they guarded. And beneath it all, a single image persisted. Terra, the throne, the center of mankind's empire and the source of the infection. Cole stood, his joints stiff, his thoughts sharp with clarity that bordered on revelation. "It's calling me home," he murmured. When he told Lysa, she stared at him as if he had confessed a heresy of the purest form. "Terra," she whispered, "we'd never make it. The Ordos will have declared us excommunicate traitorous by now. They'll burn us from orbit before we reach the void perimeter." Cole met her gaze, the faint glow beneath his skin reflecting in his eyes. Then we'll arrive as ghosts. And so they set course for the cradle of mankind, the one place from which no heretic or truth seeker ever returned unjudged. The journey through the warp was agony. The Geller field trembled, shuddering against unseen currents. Shadows pressed against the hull, whispering prayers in languages older than human thought. The relics no longer pulsed in their containment. Now they breathed, their rhythm matching Kyle's heartbeat. Sometimes he thought he felt them move within the walls, crawling like living veins through the ship's metal skin. Lysa kept the engines alive through sheer will and prayer. Her eyes were rimmed with sleepless red, her voice hoarse from chanting protective litanies that no longer carried conviction. Once, she caught her reflection in the bridge glass and screamed. When Kyle came to her, she wept silently, pointing at the glass. "It smiled," she whispered. "It smiled when I didn't." Kyle said nothing. He understood. The warp wasn't trying to devour them anymore, it was listening. They emerged, near the Sol system on the third rotation. The Astronomicon loomed before them, a pillar of light so vast it seemed to pierce eternity itself. Yet now Coyle saw it differently. The beacon's brilliance was fractured, its light pulsing unevenly, as though the flame itself flickered within its cage. Around Terra, the void rippled faintly, like breath fogging a mirror. Coyle stared at the sight, awe and dread warring behind his eyes. The light is dying. Lysa's hands trembled on the controls. If they detect us, they already have. The Vox crackled, breaking the silence. A voice filled the cabin, deep, serene, and terrible. "Vessel St. Halcyon, you enter sanctified space unauthorized. Cut engines and prepare for boarding." Cole smiled faintly. "We won't survive that." "No," Lysa agreed, "but we might survive the truth." He activated the thrusters, plunging the ship toward Terra. Warning klaxons screamed. The void around them ignited as orbital defenses opened fire, lances of golden light carving the darkness. The Halcyon shuddered, alarms wailing, armor plating melting beneath celestial fire. But the relics flared in response, their light bending the beams, turning them aside. Kyle felt the heat against his skin, but no pain, only a sensation like descending through the core of faith itself. They broke through the planetary defense net, plunging into Terra's polluted skies. The world below unfolded like a graveyard of glory. Endless cathedrals, spires piercing the smog, oceans of humanity moving in perpetual prayer. The air burned with incense and ozone. The ship's hull screamed as it tore through atmosphere, trailing a halo of fire. Kyle's grip tightened on the control yoke, voice calm amid chaos. "Aim for the cradle of the palace, the underhalls." Lisa's eyes widened. "The catacombs? That's heresy." "Then let it be heresy," Kyle said. "It's the only place they'll never follow." The St. Halcyon struck the ruins of a forgotten manufactorum on the outskirts of the palace district. Metal screamed, fire bloomed, and the relic's light died with the impact. When Kyle opened his eyes, the world had become smoke and ruin. Lysa crawled from the wreckage beside him, blood streaking her cheek. In the distance, the Imperial Palace rose against the storm, its towers like spears of gold thrust into heaven, its walls black with the soot of 1,000,000 years. Above it all, invisible but omnipresent, the Astronomicon pulsed in the sky, slower now, its rhythm matching Kyle's own. He rose, gripping the relic case to his chest. "We walk." Lysa stared at him, exhausted, hollow. "Walk where?" "Beneath," Kyle said, "where ghosts wait for light that never comes." they left the wreckage behind and entered the Holy City. The wind that moved through the lower reaches of Terra was not wind at all, but the exhalation of machines, ancient, ceaseless, and alive in ways that no Forge world could ever claim to be. The air reeked of ozone, oil, and burnt wax, the breath of a planet that had forgotten how to die. Cole and Lisa moved through that labyrinth of rusted cathedrals and half-lit corridors, guided only by the faint pulse of the relics sealed within Cale's satchel. Everywhere they went, the faithful moved in processions, chanting litanies to the throne. Pilgrims knelt before mechanical saints whose eyes glowed with cold fire. Some wore masks of gold, others their own skin flayed into patterns of devotion. They did not see Cale or Lisa as strangers. To them, every soul who bled in the Emperor's shadow was family. They simply parted, whispering fragments of prayers that sounded almost like warnings. "The light remembers," they said. "The light dreams." Lisa shuddered as they passed. "They're blind," she whispered. "They don't even look at us." Cale glanced at the nearest supplicant. The man's eyes were sewn shut, his lips raw from repetition. "Faith has never required sight," he said. They descended deeper, beyond the hab spires and manufactoria, into tunnels where the hum of machinery became a chant in itself. The deeper they went, the older the world became. Marble gave way to iron, iron to bone. Statues of forgotten saints lined the walls, their faces eroded into formlessness. Every step echoed with the weight of centuries. Cole carried a small lumen, but it seemed unnecessary. The relics in his satchel glowed faintly, casting long shadows across the walls. Sometimes the shadows moved a fraction after they did, as though they too were searching. They reached a service elevator sealed with warning sigils. Kyle brushed them aside with the authority of his rosette, though the symbol felt meaningless here, so close to the heart of all authority. The elevator groaned to life, its gears screaming as it sank through layers of history. Lisa stood beside him, hands shaking, lips moving silently in a prayer that had long lost meaning. "How far down does this go?" she asked. Cole's eyes didn't leave the darkness below. Farther than faith. When the doors opened, they stepped into a space that defied comprehension. The catacombs beneath the palace stretched outward like the roots of an impossible tree, endless and cold. Rivers of coolant flowed between the pillars, reflecting dim light from above. The walls pulsed faintly, as if veins of energy ran through the stone itself. And then the silence shifted. They heard footsteps. From between the columns emerged figures draped in gold, the custodian guard. Their armor gleamed even in the half-light, each movement measured, perfect. The leader stepped forward, his face hidden behind an impassive helm carved with the imperial aquila. His voice, when it came, was calm and absolute. "No one walks here without sanction." Cole met his gaze without flinching. "Then I am unsanctioned, but I carry the Emperor's relics." At that, the custodian's head tilted slightly, as though the words had unsettled something ancient in his programming. "Relics?" Cale unsealed the satchel just enough for the faint glow to spill out. The light struck the gold of their armor and bent it, refracting in unnatural patterns. For a moment, the custodian stood utterly still. Then the leader lowered his halberd. "You should not have come," he said. "There are truths here even we do not guard." "Then who does?" Kyle asked. The custodian's answer was not a word, but a gesture. He turned and walked deeper into the catacombs. "Follow, if you must, but you will not leave unchanged." Lisa looked at Cole, pleading with her eyes, but he only nodded. "We've come too far to stop." They followed through corridors of impossible architecture, machines fused with bone, walls etched with runes that pulsed in time with unseen heartbeats. The air was thick with heat and prayer. At last, they entered a cavern so vast it felt like standing beneath the surface of a star. At its center rose a tower of gold and glass, veins of light running through it like blood. It was beautiful and horrifying all at once, a monument to the Emperor's eternal vigil, or perhaps his eternal suffering. The custodian stopped at the base of the structure and turned to them. "Do you know what you carry, Inquisitor?" Coil's voice was barely a whisper. Echoes of the Astronomicon, fragments of the throne. The custodian regarded him for a long moment. "No, not fragments, reflections." He gestured to the tower. "This is what remains of the throne's shadow. When the Emperor ascended, the light of his divinity bled into the machine. It burned too bright for one vessel to contain. The fragments scattered across the stars, pieces of his song. What you hold are those echoes returning home." Lysa stepped back, her voice trembling. "You mean the relics are alive?" The custodian's helm turned toward her. "Alive is not the word. They remember. The throne dreams, and in its dreaming it calls its pieces back." Coil felt the pulse within the relics quicken, resonating with the golden tower before them. The air vibrated, the heat rising until it felt as though the world itself breathed. The custodian lowered his weapon. "You have done what none should have done. You've woken the reflection. It will finish what the light began." "What will it finish?" Coil demanded. The custodian's answer was soft, almost reverent. "The Emperor's prayer, the one he never stopped speaking." A tremor shook the chamber, faint but rising. The tower's light brightened, veins of gold expanding outward like cracks. Coil and Lysa staggered back as energy rippled through the air, every surface thrumming with the same hum that had haunted them since Relis Prime. Kael looked at the custodian, whose stance had shifted, not in readiness but in resignation. "Can it be stopped?" The custodian bowed, his head. "It is not meant to be stopped. It is meant to be heard." And beneath the roar of the machinery, beneath the thunder of light itself, Coil heard it, the same voice from the relics, vast and sorrowful. "He waits below the light." The chamber convulsed with radiance, each pulse of the golden tower striking like the beat of a colossal heart. Coil staggered forward, shielding his eyes from the torrent of light that poured from fissures opening across the walls. The relics within his satchel tore free of their casing and rose into the air, orbiting the tower in spirals of incandescent energy. Lysa cried out as the air burned around them, the heat thick enough to sear breath itself. Yet Kael could not look away. The sound, the hum, the chant, the endless whisper had deepened into something vast and mournful. The custodian guard knelt, their golden forms gleaming as though paying reverence to something unseen. Their voices joined in a single low prayer, spoken not in high Gothic but in the raw, primal cadence of the machine choir. "We guard, we remember, we endure." The words reverberated through Coil's bones. He took a step closer to the tower, the floor beneath him trembling like the skin of a living beast. Through the blinding haze, he saw movement, shapes flickering within the golden light. For an instant, he thought they were reflections of himself and Lysa, but then they resolved into forms neither human nor divine. Silhouettes of armored giants whose bodies flickered between man and machine, their faces hollowed by light. Each one knelt before the core of the tower, where a figure sat upon a throne of cables and crystal, its features hidden behind a halo of pure radiance. Kael's breath caught. "Is that?" The custodian's voice interrupted, steady as scripture. "You see the echo, not the source. The throne projects what the mind can bear. You are standing in the afterimage of a god." Lysa pressed her hand to her chest, voice breaking. "Then what are we hearing? What is it saying?" The custodian turned toward her, and for the first time his tone carried something almost like pity. "The Emperor prays. He has never ceased. Every breath that guides the Astronomicon is a plea, to himself, to humanity, to the silence that lies beyond the stars." Kale felt the words strike deep within him. He could taste metal on his tongue, hear the hiss of static at the edge of perception. The relic's light intensified, threads of energy linking them directly to the tower. He understood dimly that the fragments were merging, becoming part of whatever vast mechanism existed beneath the palace. He reached out instinctively, but the custodian raised a hand to stop him. "Do not touch," he warned. "It recognizes you. That is why you were called here, to remember for it." Cole froze. "What does that mean?" The custodian's helm inclined slightly. "The Emperor's mind is fractured across eternity. Each fragment yearns for reflection. You, Inquisitor, carry one of those reflections within you." Kyle's throat went dry. The spiral mark beneath his skin burned, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the tower's glow. "You're saying I'm a vessel," the custodian finished. "A mirror shard caught in mortal flesh. You saw too much, and so it saw through you. You are part of the throne's dream now." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Cole swayed, vision swimming as understanding bled into revelation. The relics, the hum, the voices, none of it was corruption, it was memory. The throne was not merely a machine sustaining the Emperor's body, it was a living mind trying to recall itself through those who had the misfortune to listen. He stumbled backward, clutching his head as flashes erupted behind his eyes. Images of Realus Prime bathed in false light. The faces of the pilgrims melting into gold. The Astronomicon's beam flickering like a dying candle. And beneath it all, the voice that had haunted him from the beginning. He waits below the light. Lysa caught him before he fell. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with horror. "Call, tell me what's happening." He met her gaze, his voice raw. "It's not heresy, it's grief. The Emperor is trying to remember himself, and every time he does, a world burns." The custodian bowed his head, silent acknowledgement. The light of faith was always a double-edged flame. What keeps humanity alive also consumes it. Another tremor ripped through the chamber, this one violent enough to shatter the air. Cracks split the golden floor, spilling blinding energy. The custodians rose as one, halberds raised, though there was nothing to fight. Lysa screamed as arcs of light slashed through the space around them. The relics, now fusing completely with the tower, screamed in sound rather than voice, a mechanical cry that tore through the soul. Call stepped forward into the storm. His robes burned away, his skin etched with lines of light that pulsed like circuitry. Every instinct screamed to flee, but something deeper, the part of him that remembered the Emperor's prayer, refused. He placed his hand upon the base of the tower. The world vanished. He was falling through light and memory, through visions of battlefields stretching from the dawn of man to the end of stars. He saw the Emperor not as a god, but as a man surrounded by ghosts, the faces of those he had consumed to become eternal. He felt the throne's agony, the strain of infinite consciousness bound in metal and worship. And beneath it all, he saw a single tear fall from that divine face, dissolving into a sea of golden fire. When he awoke, he was on his knees before the tower. The custodian stood unmoving. The light had dimmed, the relics gone. Only silence remained, vast and absolute. Lisa knelt beside him, her voice barely audible. "What did you see?" Kale's eyes lifted to the now dark tower. His voice was hoarse but calm. "The Emperor is dying, and he doesn't want to be saved." The custodian's helm turned slightly toward him. "Then, what will you do with that truth?" Kale looked down at his hands, where faint gold lines still shimmered beneath the skin. "I'll carry it. That's what we Inquisitors do." He rose slowly, the echo of the throne still pulsing behind his heartbeat. "But I won't serve silence anymore." The custodian inclined his head. "Then pray the throne never dreams your name again." As Kale and Lisa ascended toward the surface, the hum followed them. Softer now, like breath after confession. Yet every light they passed flickered in rhythm with their steps, as though the world itself remembered. When they reached the open air, dawn was breaking over Terra. The sky burned with false gold, and for a moment Cole thought he saw the light of the Astronomicon steady itself once more. He almost smiled. And then, from deep beneath the planet came the faintest echo, distant, patient, eternal. He waits below the light. The void above Terra was alive with fire. Orbiting battle stations drifted like dying suns, their lights dimmed by the same faltering radiance that once illuminated the galaxy. Kale Veritas stood at the viewport of a stolen courier ship, watching the pale shimmer of the Astronomicon pulse like a heartbeat slipping out of rhythm. The world he had left behind, the Holy Throne World, the heart of faith itself, was now only a memory of gold drowned in ash. He had seen its foundations, the ghosts that breathed beneath its sanctity, and he knew now that no prayer could unmake what the Emperor had become. Behind him, the small cabin was dim except for the glow of a flickering lumen. Lisa sat near the console, patching a wound along her arm with rough stitches. Her voice was hoarse, stripped of all reverence. "We can't go back," she said. "Not to the Ordos, not to anyone. The moment they know we lived, they'll send fleets to erase us." Cole turned from the viewport. His reflection fractured across the glass like the shards of the truth he carried. "They'll do it anyway," he replied softly. "Silence is the only empire that still grows." He sat opposite her, hands folded. Beneath his skin, the faint golden lines still glowed, pulsing gently, reminders of the communion he could neither escape nor comprehend. It was not pain he felt now, but a strange awareness, an intimacy with the hum that lingered in the spaces between his thoughts. He had become part of something vast, and yet he was more alone than he had ever been. Lisa met his eyes. "You saw him, didn't you? Not the statues, not the Emperor they preach about, him." Kyle nodded once. The words came slowly, as though pulled from a wound. "He's awake, but not alive. His mind is scattered through every light in the void. Each flicker of the Astronomicon is one breath, one thought. And each thought tears him further apart." Lisa swallowed hard. "Then what are we meant to do? What could anyone do?" Kale looked down at his hands. "Once I believed ignorance was salvation, that not knowing was the last mercy left to humanity, but I was wrong. Silence is a weapon, and it's killing us as surely as any heresy." The hum within the ship deepened, faint but deliberate, echoing through the metal like a distant voice. Lisa tensed. "You hear it again?" He nodded. "It never left. It's not a sound anymore, it's memory. It wants me to carry it farther." "To where?" Kyle's gaze lifted to the star map above the console, to the scattered points of light beyond Imperial reach. "To the edge, where faith ends and the void begins. If the Emperor's fragments are scattered, maybe one lies beyond the reach of the Astronomicon." something untouched by his dying light. Lisa stared at him as if she barely recognized the man before her. "And if you find it, then maybe the dream ends," he said quietly, "or begins again." They fell into silence. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Kale closed his eyes, listening. The hum inside his chest began to change. No longer a simple pulse, but a melody, faint and human. He realized with sudden clarity that it was the same hymn he had heard on Raylus Prime, the song the pilgrims had sung before dissolving into light. But now, within it, he heard words hidden beneath the faith. "We are his reflection, and he is ours." Coyle rose, the weight of inevitability settling across his shoulders. "Prepare the warp drives," he said. "We're going beyond the charts." Lysa hesitated, then nodded. "There's no coming back from there." "I know." As the engines ignited, the ship trembled, its system straining against the unnatural pull of a course no navigator had ever dared plot. The stars elongated, stretching into streaks of light as the ship tore through the veil. The hum swelled, filling the cabin, growing louder until it felt as though the air itself sang. Kale sat in the pilot's chair, eyes unfocused, the light beneath his skin pulsing in harmony with the warp's heartbeat. Images flickered behind his eyes. Worlds burning, cathedrals collapsing, a golden throne that had forgotten the man who once sat upon it. He felt Lisa's hand on his shoulder, grounding him, human, still amid the divine noise. "Kyle," she whispered, "what if what you saw wasn't truth? What if it was the warp showing you what it wanted you to believe?" He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Then truth and illusion have finally become the same thing, and that, too, must be understood." The warp screamed around them, but the relics, what little remained of them, now embedded within the ship's systems, sang back. The vessel moved through space not by propulsion, but by resonance, carried along the same current that flowed through the Astronomican's dying light. Hours, or perhaps centuries, passed within that storm. When the ship finally burst into calm, the void outside was different. The stars here were faint, dim embers in an ocean of black. There was no beacon, no Astronomican, only silence. Lysa stared out, breath caught. "Where are we?" Kyle's voice was almost reverent, beyond the Emperor's sight. He unbuckled his restraints and stood, the hum fading to a whisper that seemed to wait. At the viewport, he placed his hand against the glass. There was something out there, not a star, not a planet, but a glow, faint and rhythmic, pulsing like the relics once did. It pulsed back. Lisa's voice trembled. "What is that?" Kale smiled faintly, the expression equal parts wonder and despair. A reflection, maybe the first one that ever looked back. The glow brightened, and once again the voice came, not from outside, but from within, gentle now, almost human. "He waits below the light." Kale closed his eyes. "Then I'm coming." The glow outside the viewport deepened, spreading across the void like a wound opening in the fabric of creation. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically, as though breathing in the dark. Kale stood unmoving, one hand pressed against the glass, his eyes reflecting the pale gold that seeped through the hull. Lisa rose behind him, her voice barely a whisper. "Kyle, that light, it's not on any chart." He didn't turn. "It's not supposed to be." She approached cautiously, the hum within the ship rising in pitch as though reacting to her proximity. "We're too close to the edge, the warp currents are unstable. Whatever that is, it's not a star." "I know," he said. "It's a door." The words chilled her. A door to what? Coyle's gaze never left the light. To where the first prayer was spoken. The glow flared as if in answer, swallowing the stars. The ship's instruments went dead, their displays filled with static. Lisa gripped the console to steady herself as the deck began to vibrate. "Kyle, we need to pull back. The field won't hold." But Kale only smiled, calm amid the tremor. "It's calling me, don't you hear it? The same voice that spoke through the relics, the same whisper beneath the throne. It's all one song, Lisa." She took a step toward him, her fear cracking into anger. "You've gone too far. You think this is revelation, but it's contagion. The same madness that killed the Navigator, that burned Rylus Prime, wasn't madness," Cole interrupted, turning at last. His eyes glowed faintly, not with reflected light, but from within. It was awakening. Every world that burned was a mirror shattering, and every shard shows another face of what we call divinity. Lisa stared, unable to look away. His voice had changed, softer, melodic, as if two people spoke through one mouth. She reached for her weapon, then stopped. He didn't feel like something that could be killed anymore. Outside, the glow shifted from gold to white. The void bent inward, pulling them closer. The St. Halcyon screamed in protest, its metal bones twisting as if dragged by invisible hands. The Geller field failed in a single shiver, and suddenly the warp was there, alive, aware, pressing against the hull like an ocean of thought. Kale stepped forward, eyes wide with wonder. "He's here!" Lisa shouted over the rising roar. "Who?" "The one beneath the light." The ship plunged through the veil, and the universe broke. For an instant, there was nothing but silence. Perfect, infinite silence. And then Coil stood upon a plane of shifting light that was neither warp nor real space. The air shimmered with the faint resonance of voices long dead. Lisa was beside him, though the world bent differently around her, as if she existed half a breath out of phase. The sky above was not black but the color of burning parchment, covered in symbols that rewrote themselves as they watched. At the center of that expanse stood a figure. Not a man, not entirely. Its form shifted between flesh and gold, its face both radiant and ruined. The light that emanated from it was not illumination but memory, the echo of all faith ever uttered. Cole sank to his knees, not in reverence but recognition. "You," he whispered. The figure spoke without moving its lips. "You carried my reflection." The voice was infinite, each word resonating through marrow and mind alike. Cole trembled. "You are the Emperor." The figure regarded him in silence, then answered, "I am the shadow of what you call that name, the prayer that remained when the man was gone." Kale's voice broke. "Then why call me here?" "Because you listened." The world rippled, and suddenly Kale saw countless fragments drifting through the void, each one a shard of light, each one a memory of the Emperor's mind scattered through time and space. They flickered in and out of existence, billions of echoes murmuring prayers to themselves. Some were planets, some were men, some were nothing but dreams of what could have been. He saw himself among them, a spark born from the same dying flame. Lysa's voice reached him through the storm. "Call, we need to leave. This place, it's inside your head." He turned to her, tears tracing lines of gold down his face. "No, it's inside all of us. Every believer who's ever prayed to the throne has carried a piece of this place. We are the reflection, Lysa. We always were." She shook her head, backing away. "That's heresy." Cole smiled sadly. "No, it's the last truth they couldn't kill." The figure stepped closer, the ground trembling with each movement. "Do you understand now? Every light in the void is me. Every death, every faith, every silence. The throne does not hold me. It contains only what I could not bear to remember. Coil's voice was barely a breath. And what is that? That I am human. The light flared, consuming the horizon. Gale screamed, not in pain but in revelation, as the fragments around them converged, merging into a single pulse that resonated with his own. Lisa reached for him, her hand passing through his form as if he were already fading. Gale. He looked at her one last time. Tell them what you saw. Tell them he remembers. The world exploded into brilliance. When Lisa opened her eyes, she was back aboard the St. Halcyon. The ship floated in calm, its systems restored, its hull unscarred. Coil was gone. Only the faint glow of the relics remained, pulsing once, then fading to darkness. Outside, the stars burned quietly, unmarked by miracle or ruin. The Astronomican's light, faint and distant, seemed steadier than before, as if something deep within it had exhaled. Lisa sat in silence for a long time. Then she whispered into the void, "He waits below the light." And somewhere in the black between galaxies, a new pulse answered. Soft, human, unending.